Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how I've been making these notebook covers. That is a pattern I purchased from Designs by Juju. Now this particular one is called the A5 Notebook Journal and it's made in 3 hoopings. It's really easy. I did come a little unstuck in one part of the instructions, so that's why I thought I'd do a video. They do other sizes available to fit composition notebook, but as I said, this particular one is called the A5 Quilted Notebook Journal. It's all made completely in the hoop, so you need an embroidery machine with a big enough hoop. Now this particular pattern I think says you can use a 6 by 10 or a 9.5 by 14 hoop. Now I've got an 8 by 12, so that's what I've been using. All the stitch file comes complete with a PDF, complete with instructions, and it tells you the sizes that you need to cut your fabric and your wadding for your particular notebook. I've got my fabrics already pre-cut. I'll just show you a couple of them. So you can choose to have different styles of quilting. So on all of these I've gone with the same. I've gone with like a diamond quilting on the front and on the back, and then I've gone with a horizontal quilting on the spine, and I've just done all those the same, and I will be doing the same today, but there are other designs and you can mix and match them. You can choose to have the pen pocket or not, it's entirely up to you. I have put the pen pocket on all of mine. I've already sold a couple of these. Some of them are mine, some are for gifts, but I just thought it was a nice project. They've all got an elasticated fastening, so the book's inside and you just slide your book in and out of the flaps, and then you fasten over the elastic and that holds everything in place. This one has got a slightly narrower elastic. I don't really think it matters. All the stitching is all done directly on the machine. They don't take a lot of fabric, and as I said, all the instructions will be in the accompanying PDF once you buy the stitch file. So I've got my first hoop in my embroidery machine, complete with the stabilizer. So I'm now just going to walk you through the process of making the cover. Okay, so I've got the USB stick with the design in the side of my machine. So I'm just going to go and find the file, and I'm going to stitch out the placement stitch for the batting. Now I've already got my thread loaded up and I've got my spool in and everything should be good to go. So I'm just going to put the foot down and I'm going to press start. Okay, so the next step is to put the batting down, and you just put that so that it covers the placement lines that you stitch out, making sure you've got enough overlap all the way round, at least ½ inch, if not more. Okay, so you need to remove the hoop from the machine, but do not unhoop the stabilizer. And then what you need to do is trim away this excess stabilizer from where you've just stitched. Okay, so that's ready to go back in the hoop. I've trimmed away all the excess, and I'm going to bring in my outer piece of fabric and cover the batting so that it's all completely covered. You want your pattern side right side up if you've got a right and a wrong side. This is now going to tack this down, and then it's going to do all the quilted pattern on the front that I've chosen. Okay, so the next piece is to put your inside flap down, and you've got an idea where it's going to start stitching because of the needle placement. So you want to bring in your folded piece of fabric with the fold towards the middle, towards the needle, not the outside edge. And you want to measure 1.5 inches from this outside stitch line up to the fold, and that's where your fabric is going to sit. And then just make sure that you've got enough fabric extending beyond the top and the bottom of the stitch line. The next step is to bring your inside lining in, and this goes face down, and again it gives you an idea of where it's going to start because of the needle position. So this is my fabric, this is the right side. I'm going to place it down, and you want the top and the bottom to extend beyond your stitch lines, and this time this one has to be placed 1 inch from this outer stitch line that's just been sewn. And this is where I got a little bit confused when I first started making them. But if you just remember that you need to be able to see the waste fabric on the outside edge, that should hopefully help you remember. So now I'm just going to stitch the next step. And as I say, you can see where the needle is going to fall. If you've not got this in the right position, just move your fabric over. Okay, so that's the first hooping done, so this can be taken out of the machine and unhooped and put on one side. I'm going to bring in hoop number 2 and lock it in, and then I'm just going to go and find the next part of the design, which is saved on my USB stick. I'm going to put the foot down and stitch the outline for the wadding. Okay, again I'm going to put the piece of wadding in so it covers all the basting stitches that have just been put down. Put the foot down and secure this in place. Take the hoop out of the machine and trim away excess wadding. This needs to go back into the machine now, and we're ready to stitch the next step. Just lock that back into place, bring in my front piece of fabric, position it over the wadding, making sure it covers everywhere. This is going to do the tack down stitch, and then again it's going to do the quilted design on the front panel. Okay, so the next step is to do the placement line for the elastic. So I'm just going to put the foot down and it does about 4 stitches. Then you need to position your elastic over those stitches, just so it extends about 1/2 inch beyond the outside stitch line. Put the foot down and let it tack this down. It will get sewn again later. So you need to move your elastic to one side, and it's going to do the placement line at the bottom. Okay, so making sure the elastic's not twisted in any way, you're going to line it up now with the placement stitches on the bottom, and I just pull mine ever so slightly and just hold it in place, put the foot down and let it tack it down. You can cut that away, and now it's moved to the position to do the next flap. So you're going to bring your flap in with the fold towards the inside of the hoop, making sure that your fabric extends above and beyond your outside stitch lines, and it needs to be positioned 1.5 inches from this outside left hand edge stitching. So again, you should be able to see from where the fabric is. Just make sure you've got it at 1.5 inches so it's nice and straight all the way down. Okay, again, so you're going to bring your piece of lining fabric in. You want it facing right side down. It does tell you to fold over 1 inch on one of the long sides. So if you do that, make sure your fold is towards the left of your needle. Again, you want to position this so that it extends above and beyond your outside stitch line, and this time you want it 1 inch from this right hand outer edge of stitching. Again, you should know roughly where it's going to be because the needle should set itself in position for you. Okay, so that's hoop 2 finished, so we're going to go on to hoop 3. Before I start stitching hoop 3, I'm going to show you how to prepare the front and back fabric because these need to be placed into hoop 3 at part of the stitching. Okay, so I've got the third hoop with the stabilizer ready on my machine, but before we go any further, I just need to show you what we need to do with the front and the back pieces. So these are as they were stitched and as they've come off the machine. This is the back, this is the front. You need to fold this lining fabric back out of the way on both pieces. So you should have all your raw edges on the outside of each piece. And then I'm going to trim away here and here. Now what you want to do is bring in your ruler and line the edge of your ruler up with this stitch line, and then move the ruler over that stitch line only by about 1/16 of an inch. So basically you want to line it up on the ruler so you can see the stitching line, and then you move it over ever so slightly. So the stitching line needs to remain intact. You're not cutting through it, but you want to cut as close as you dare. So that's how it looks. I'll try and zoom in if I can at this point. You can also just trim away the top and bottom stabilizer just to get it out of the way. You can leave the outside edge because that's all going to get cut away when I start putting this together. So again, I'm just going to turn this round because I'm right-handed and I prefer to cut from this side. So again, I've got the raw edges here, I've got the stitch line here, I've got this piece folded back out of the way. I'm going to line this ruler up on my stitch line and then just go over it by about 1/16. You want to still be able to see the stitches through the ruler, that way you know you're not going to be cutting them off, but you want to get as close as you possibly can. And again, just to get this out of the way, I'm just going to trim the top and the bottom piece. So this is the front, and that's got the elastic inside. That's how I know it's the front, and this is the back. Okay, so I'm just going to keep them like this for now because they need to go in the hoop in a few minutes. So the next part of the process is to call up the spine and start stitching the spine, and then these will all get stitched in together. Okay, so I'm going to put the foot down and stitch the placement lines. Okay, so this is the placement line for the back piece of the book, and the cut edge I've just shown you is going to line up with this stitch line. Now I don't know how close I can zoom in, so I'm bringing the back piece of fabric in. I'm checking it's not got the elastic in, so I know it's the back. And this cut edge that I've just shown you how to trim is going to line up on top of this stitch line now. Now there's a little couple of stitches at the top here and at the bottom, and that's where you line the top and the bottom of your fabric up with. So put those in place first, so line those up and make sure that this stitch line on your fabric is directly over this stitch line, and you do that the same at the bottom. Now I hold it in place, so I'm just going to put the foot down. Once it starts stitching, it will be okay. So it's going to do the placement line for the front panel now. And you're going to do exactly the same thing. You're going to bring your front panel in where you've got your top and your bottom row of stitching. That's going to line up with the stitch that is coming out here horizontally. And then this stitch line here that you trimmed next to is going to go on top of that stitch line. And the reason it's putting these little horizontal marks in is so that your front and your back panel all line up when it goes together. Just make sure that everything's folded out of the way. Okay, so the next step is going to sew the placement stitch for the batting for the spine. I'm going to bring my batting in and line it up so it completely covers that basting stitch. Okay, so the next step is that you need to trim the batting away from the spine, but just trim the sides, not the top and the bottom. So you can do this while it's still in the hoop if you want, or you can take it out. Just make sure that you're not trimming through any of your fabric. I put my fingers behind so that I can feel the blade of the scissors, and that way I know I'm not going through the fabric. And when you're trimming this batting away, when you get past the outer stitch lines, cut in a straight line. Don't be tempted to come in because it starts doing its satin stitch off here, and if you cut the batting away not straight, it won't cover the stitching. So now I need to bring my piece of spine fabric in and position that over so it covers all the basting lines. This is bigger than I need, but I'd rather have it bigger than be too short. And now it's going to do the horizontal quilt lines for the spine. So now I need to trim away the fabric from the right and the left hand side, but I find this bit easy to do out of the machine. So I'm going to take the hoop out, and you want to trim away in a straight line on the right and the left. Now the easiest way I find to do this is to fold the fabric over and to kind of put a finger crease in it. Because again, what you want to do when you get past the edge of your stitches, you want to go in a straight line. You don't want to be tempted to come in because the satin stitches won't be covering the fabric if you don't cut it completely straight. So I just follow the fold line that I've creased and until I get to the stitches, and then I just do the same as I did before. I put my fingers behind, lift the fabric up vertically, and just go along with my scissors. You don't want to cut through the stitching. It's not the end of the world if you do, because it should be picked up in the satin stitch that's going to hold it all together, but try not to. So again, I can see the crease line. I'm just going to follow that line up, and then I like to turn it around and do the other side so it's facing the light. So again, I'm going to fold this over, keep all your flaps out of the way, and then just follow your crease line. So now this can go back in the machine, making sure you're keeping all your flaps out of the way so nothing gets caught up underneath your hoop. So lock everything back in place, make sure all your fabrics are out of the way, put your foot down, and it's now going to do a stitch right down here. Okay, so just a couple of things to point out here. It does these 2 rows of beautiful satin stitch right down the spine, and that's why you need to make sure that you trim your fabric and your batting nice and close to the stitch line. Then here is the top line of the first row of quilting on the spine, but you can see that the satin stitch extends about a half an inch beyond that, and that's why I said you need to, when you're trimming your spine fabric, you need to carry on cutting in a straight line once you've got past this quilting line, because if you don't, if you cut in on your fabric here, this section here will be batting and it'll just look a mess. It'll just be stitching over batting. So now what it does a straight line right down the middle of the satin stitch. So that's the next 2 steps that I'm going to do. So the next part of the design is some placement stitches again, for if you want to put a ribbon, you know, that holds your pages for you. Now I've not done that on any of them, and on my machine I've just skipped this step, but just for the sake of the video I'll show you what it does. So again, it puts about 4 or 5 stitches up here, and you'd put your ribbon in, leave your ribbon dangling down here, and then it will stitch it in place. These stitches are not going to be seen, they're caught up within the seam allowance, so I'll just carry on as if I've got the ribbon in place. So I'll stitch that line again, which would be the stitches to hold the ribbon in place. Then what I would do, if you have put a ribbon in, I've tucked the ribbon into one of the flaps out of the way, just keep it out of the way. So what it's going to do now, if you've chosen a spine that's got the pen pocket, it's going to do the placement lines for the pen pocket. So for this one, I've just chosen a piece of fabric that's the same as the actual spine. I've prepared it as it tells me to do, so now I'm just going to place it in position. So basically it tells you to fold a piece of fabric. This is longer than I need and wider than I need, but this is what I'm going to use. So the fabric gets lined up with the top of the stitches up here, and then it needs to be wide enough to cover the 2 basting lines it's just put in. Then that's going to tack this down in place now. So this needs to be removed from the hoop now, because again you need to trim away the excess on the right and the left hand side of this pen pocket so that it can do its satin decorative stitches next. So I'm just going to take the hoop out of the machine, I'm not unhooping it, and again I'm just going to trim away. So I'm just going to, I don't need all this fabric on the bottom, so I'm going to just chop some of it off. And again I'm going to do the same, I'm going to fold it up and make a crease line just where it's sewn it down, and I'm just going to cut along that crease line as close to the stitches as I can get. And you really do need a pair of these curved scissors when you're doing anything to do machine embroidery. It just helps you get as close to the fabric as possible. So that needs to go back in the machine now. It's going to do the decorative stitch on either side of the pocket, and then it's nearly finished. I've just put it straight back in where it's just finished. I'm going to put the foot down and let it do its 2 lines of decorative stitch along the edge of the pen pocket. So it's done its 2 rows of satin stitch. It's now going to go over those with a decorative stitch. Okay, so we're nearly there. So what you need to do now is fold over your lining fabric from the right hand side, making sure that the 1 inch that you folded back is facing up. And then you need to bring in your other piece of lining and position that over it. So this is how it's looking. So the right hand side's come in. You've got the wrong side facing up apart from the 1 inch that you've pressed over, and then this is just going to fold over the top, and then there's 2 more steps and this is finished. It can be unhooped and we can trim it and turn it right side out. Okay, so that's completely finished now. So this can be taken off the machine and out of the hoop. I'll show you how to trim it up and how to flip it. That whole stitch out has taken just over an hour and 20 minutes. So with all your cutting of your fabrics and then you know, turning it right side out and pressing it, I would say this is probably about an hour and 45-minute project. Okay, so I'm going to take it out of the hoop. And here it is. So you can clearly see now the outside edge all around the notebook cover. So what you want to do is trim all this excess away. Now, I wouldn't do more than 1/4 of an inch, because if your seams are too bulky, when you come to turn it out, it's going to look a mess. So I would go 1/4 of an inch or less. You can either do it with scissors, with pinking shears, or with a ruler and a trimmer. It's entirely up to you. So I'm just going to line my ruler up. So it's about 1/8 I'm going to do mine. So I'm going to line the 1/8 line up of my ruler on this stitch line all the way round all 4 sides and trim it away. So what you want to do now is just cut off the corners as close to the stitching as you can, but obviously not through your stitches. This will just help when you're turning it the right side out. So that's it. That's all the cutting, all the trimming. It's just ready. There's one last thing that you can do. It's entirely up to you. When you turn it over, you've got your stabilizer here. You can either leave that on, or I've been folding mine back and just cutting it away. It's entirely up to you. It doesn't really matter. You can leave it in or take it out. So this is what you've got now. So what you want to do is, first of all, you've got the lining piece that's open at both ends with no fold back on it. So you want to put your hand inside and grab the outside of your cover and pull it all through, and then come to the other side where you've got the inch turn back and pull that through. So you're going to end up with this. Okay, and this is why I said only make your seams 1/4 of an inch or less. So this is what you've got now. So you've got 2 open ends and a fold here that folds under. So now you need to turn it over and you need to get your pockets. You're going to push your fingers into the corner and push your pockets out. Now I use big ball tool ends. I've had this years. I'm not so sure it says Pergamano on it or something like that, but I like this. Anything at all that you can get into the corners and poke your corners out without going through your fabric. And again, you want to manipulate your seams so that you only see from the inside. See, like here, I don't know how well you'll see, but I can see the flat fabric, and I don't want that. So you need to pull these over and press it so that when you turn it back over, you're only seeing the outside of the fabric. Then again, you do the same with the other flaps. So you turn these through, poke out your corners. These flaps then hide those 2 outer lining ends, and then flip your elastic. So this is what you've got now. It just needs pressing. I'll go away and press it and I'll bring it back. But this is how it's looking. So you've got your front, your back, your spine, your pen pocket, and your elastic to keep it all fastened. Okay, so I'm just going to trim. I've got a couple of threads there. And then I just need to bring in a book. And then you just pop one side and the other. And there it is. bring a pen in, put that in, and then you can fold over your elastic, and that's your project. So as I say, I've made a couple of these to sell. This one and the other grey one, which I'll show you in a minute, are presents. A couple of them are for me. There's another one, and there's the one I've just made today. So go and have a look at Designs by Juju and see if you want to purchase the pattern. Please give the video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.